Right, here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Female Leaders on Fire Live, and we're on our second episode today. So I'm super excited because I've got a good friend and guest here who's also a fellow coach. And I'm excited for what we're going to be talking about today. So I've got Alexandra with me, and she's the founder of Speaking Ambition, and she's on a mission to help more data-led leaders, help them to really tap into their emotional intelligence and really just be able to be leaders in their own way. So on a similar quest to me, just with a slightly different audience. So I'm super excited you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm great. I'm really excited to be here too.
Oh, good. We've just been doing a little bit of stretching and limbering because we were both feeling a little bit of a lunchtime kind of lull. So if you've got any comments as we're going through and chatting, just post them up. If we don't see them live, we'll come back and we'll add them as we kind of as we go. So and what we're going to talk about today was just a really interesting topic. So I put up a poll earlier this week. And this week I've been talking about the superpower of female leaders because that's who I work with. And what are they? What do they tend to be? What are just inherent kind of traits that we tend to have as women that make us great leaders? So things we were talking about: intuition, empathy, vulnerability, compassion, ability to see different perspectives, and the ability to kind of have that real resilience of just kind of take things on the chin and kind of keep going, and think of their team first and lead from that place of kind of vulnerable courage, if you like. Hi, Shri, how are you? So we're going to be talking today just about whether this is even a subject. Because when I put the poll up, it was really interesting. And a lot of you came back with great points just around these really inherent female characteristics and male characteristics, or are they just characteristics of male leaders or just great leaders rather than a particular gender? So what would you say, Alexandra? What would you say? Do you think there are characteristics that lean more towards kind of a particular gender that make great leaders? Or do you think it's actually just down to being a great leader and kind of leading as yourself? Or where do you kind of stand on this?
Okay, so I do get a little bit opinionated.
That's fine. We welcome that. Absolutely. We love a rant.
We're always with the added, I suppose the caveat that it is just everything's always an opinion, isn't it, and an experience. Yeah. So I'm always excited to hear different points of view.
Yeah, but, it's what's true for you, isn't it? So yeah,
exactly. It's what's my experience or what my experience or knowledge is. But I really feel that it's and I think we're learning this more and more as the world becomes a more accepting place to be in, and we're breaking down barriers, which is that they're different energies that you bring to the table. And at the moment, yes, we could say that you get a very masculine place of work, and so I work a lot with finance departments, and sometimes, especially in more like investment, and I know my experience of working in some like hedge fund places and things like that has been very masculine indeed, and I've worked with civil engineers and that kind of thing, but I think it's more how we've been nurtured. So it depends how you were how you were brought up and what your experiences were, and the culture as well. So when there are masculine, like male and female qualities, but only because those have been inherently nurtured. And one of the reasons why I kind of became more awake to this from my perspective is that I had a slightly different upbringing. I was born in the 80s and grew up so 80s, 90s.
You're Madonna, a child of Madonna, whereas I'm probably late ABBA era. Like I was born to Dancing Queen, so I was number one. Yeah, it was number one when I was born, so let's probably show my age a bit.
I think mine was, I remember my mum always saying it was around Live Aid. So maybe we will rock you. I think Walking on Sunshine was number one.
Oh, nice. Classic. We totally tangented.
There you go. Tangent. But no, whereas, because I grew up in a very conservative rural area where you had your classic nuclear families, and the women were at home and the men went off to work, and also a lot of farming communities and things like that where I am. But my situation was vastly different in comparison, in that I was raised by a single mother, not from divorce. She just had a situation where she ended up with me and decided that she was going to be a mum, and she was at the height of her career. She was working on Fleet Street, so she was the one commuting to the office. She was the one that moved us down from London. We had she got her own home, and I knew nothing different. So I didn't horrendous English. I didn't know anything.
It's kind of that was your view of the world, wasn't it? That was kind of normal to you. That was your everyday.
So I had this woman who, well, often actually I didn't, just like your classic kind of almost like Mad Men thing. Like I would have a childcare or a nanny or an au pair, and she was, because we didn't have family nearby. And so she was going off to the office all dressed up in her kind of shoulder pads,
big phone,
like that. Going off to London, and on the days were like inset days and things like, I got to go to the city and I got to go into the office, and she was well regarded as well. So I saw this powerhouse of a woman who did everything, and it didn't occur to me that there was any, I could be like her, or I could be like the mums at my school. And so I never saw a barrier there. Whereas I have seen with people I've worked with, and because they've told me, they've said, nothing was expected of me. Nothing was ever pushed of me to be anything more, or it was told that it would be unladylike or this to be anything other than what was expected growing up. So I do think that how you were brought up and your personality has a huge bearing.
I remember a particular instance when mine was probably the opposite yours. So it's a very nuclear family. I had my mum and my dad. My dad he was just going out to work in all weathers, like really pushed himself. He ended up as a lawyer working with the county council. My mum when she had both of us, she then had time off to look after us until we got to school age, but it meant that things were really difficult kind of financially. So they were just kind of watching the money, and I could see my mum making clothes for us and making our food stretch, that kind of thing. But there was very much that sense of it was just the right thing to do. That was just what she wanted. But she has said to me, as we've kind of got close over the last few years, she's like, I didn't have any of the opportunities that you have now. She said, I'm so proud of you because you run this international business. I just don't feel like there was that available to me at that point. I did the very traditional, I went to school, I went to college for a bit, I did okay, became a secretary, was good at that, but there wasn't a clear next step for me. And there was that contrast with my dad and his career kind of moving up. And then for my mum, when she took that career break, she then went back in at that similar level, just in a different role. And I do think the opportunities were very different then. And I don't think it was expected. So it's incredible that you had that completely different example of your mum, which is, the opposite extreme of, completely independent, going into London, has this huge career, really well respected. And I do think a lot of it comes down to nurture and kind of what you're brought up with. But it's also, I still see it now, and I keep looking at stats as I'm kind of writing more and putting things together for my new podcast, which will be available soon. But it's still a man's world in the corporate world. And I think there's the nurture and how we're brought up. And I remember one particular incident with my gran, and I loved her to bits. And I was just a really excitable little girl. And I think this particular day I was just like really, really overexcited, high energy dancing around. She just said to me, and she said it with a smile, I do remember that. And she just said, little girl should be seen and not heard. And I just remember it kind of just closed me down, and I just remember being really hurt and ashamed of having all this energy and this excitement and this passion. And suddenly it's like I was wrong with one of the people that I love most in the world. And I know that she said it with good intent. But that in that moment,
or not just children, but
little girl to be seen and not heard. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So this isn't making my grad seem bad or anything, because she was an absolute role model. I think it was just a statement that was used quite often, and it wasn't unusual. But I think there's two parts that I see in kind of challenge around female and male leadership. I think the role modeling still in the corporate world is still a man's world. So you can see that through the stats, you can see that through the characteristics that are most respected, like the go-getting, the kind of almost aggressive, the almost like, think of the people around you so much. But then there's more examples now coming through of very, very much more feminine, balanced leadership. So if you think of New Zealand and their Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, I can never say her surname, everything that she went through in her first 2 years, she's managing, there was a terrorist attack that was obviously lockdown and everything they went through, that the whole world went through, and she just went through all these huge things, and she did that with a brand new baby.
Yeah, well, breastfeeding.
It was humility and compassion, and also, I just think that there's that balance, and I loved it when you talked about energies, because I do think this part of this is also down to the energies. Because if you think about the masculine energy is the kind of getting things done, what I call kind of doing energy, and the feminine energy that you need to balance it out, because you can't constantly be in doing mode. Like, none of us can. It's not the best of anyone. And if that's being energy, that's the more feminine traits of, and we are human beings at the end of the day. We're not human doings. So there needs to be that balance in some way.
So it's interesting you've just said about, like, because when you were talking, what it sounds like is, in terms of the doing, it's almost very much the hunter-gatherer kind of energy. And then and you said when you were talking about the women's side, it's very much almost the nurturing, the supportiveness side. So I talk, because I do a lot with communication and speaking, and how we come across in that way, and I always take people back to why we communicate in the first place, which is very much, picture yourself being in a cave with a little fire, and drawings on the wall, and if you're a man, you're going to have to go out and club some saber-toothed tigers to get some food, and have that response system, which is the testosterone, which is those kind of hormones, and again, the women would be making accurate eye contact and judgment calls to protect any young, and also protect herself in future. And we see this in all types of animals. But we've evolved since that time, where we can now utilize all of these strengths, because we no longer fulfill one type of role. So yes, there is the masculine energy on one side. There's still hunter-gatherer type, that doing, as you say, and then but as you're saying, with Jacinda, but we also see it with other leaders as well. I'm thinking of Obama, I'm thinking of Mandela, of strength, like you don't want to mess with them, but equally, that if your child was sick, or they have
There's humility there as well. There is the compassion and empathy.
Compassion, absolutely. This kind of gratitude and generosity and real humanity in them. But you don't want to mess with them either. I
think Brené Brown calls it strong backs and soft hearts. It's like that proud and tall, standing behind who I am, but also my heart is open. Which I really like. It's that combination, and I think it's that step away from, again, something that I remember just a lot in my childhood was, you don't always need to show emotion. Not everyone needs to know your business, and it's certainly in corporate world for me, a lot of my feedback was, you're over emotional, like you can really overreact, you take things incredibly personally for a long time, and when you're really passionate, people see it almost as like aggressive, because you're just in the moment, and you just want it done, and it makes you very action orientated. So
it makes you, though, so the thing about when people are saying, though, that someone is over emotional, or you're having a reaction, it's not about how you feel, it's and what's happening to you in that moment. They're not being empathetic, but they're reacting based on how they're feeling, and that's why it's massively uncomfortable. And when people don't learn to manage their emotions, or recognize their emotions, or why they're an issue, basic emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
They don't understand. They're like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? And I can't cope with this. So whereas someone who is emotionally driven and is so aware of their emotions equally might not have, and in that moment is in a reaction stage and not potentially aware of, and I don't think it means that you need to potentially do anything, but just be aware of how that might impact someone who has no idea how to deal with emotions. So overall, that's connected. And as soon as you said it, like dealing when you're growing up, and I remember I had a bit of a rough time at a certain portion of my childhood later on, and I remember being at primary school. So we're talking and all this stuff had been going on at home, and I was at school, and of course you become little pressure cookers, don't you?
Yeah.
And I remember this boy, I was the water monitor, like I had to do the water, and this boy screamed at me, and I'd been in a faraway place just thinking of something, and he yelled at me, and I just burst out crying. And this happens, doesn't it, in the boardroom, this kind of like something's going on behind the scenes. And the teacher took me out, and instead of comforting me or being empathetic, I remember how soft she was, and she knelt down to me and held my hands and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, there are these things going on at home." And she looked at me clean in the eye and said, "But that's at home, and we don't bring that to school."
I had goosebumps. I thought it was a really magical, special moment, but not in that way.
No, I felt in that moment so
put it back in a book
and alone, and even more like, oh, finally someone's about to reach out to me and just connect with me on a human level. And I was like, I felt like I've been left adrift, and I was like, and even now I still feel that.
I've got goosebumps, yeah.
and you think about, so those skills then she almost approached me with this level of softness and empathy. It was like she was luring me in.
Then here you are, and took it away.
So in those moments, you need those skills, those nurturing and supportive skills. And I think
stepping away from that fear of kind of being judged for how you feel, and knowing actually, I talk about feel all the feelings, and your feelings are just feedback. They're your message from it. They're your heart, and this is what is really true for me. Your feelings are your truth. So ignoring them, you're ignoring your own truths. And even as a leader, it's not about, when I talk about vulnerability as well, I love Brené Brown's kind of definition and how she talks about it, because it's not in that I'm going to break down and tell everyone about it way. I'm not, I don't want to sit in it and wallow in it. But actually, it's where I am right now, and that vulnerability to say, it is challenging at the moment, or this happened and I'm just stuck in it a bit at the moment. And it's that brings into what I think is such an important part of leadership, which I think Brené talks about as well, which is care and connection. It's how you get that leadership, that loyalty, and that excitement, but also that I will go the extra mile for this person. I believe in this person. I trust this person because they have that vulnerability and that ability to kind of just share when things aren't great, or share when there's that passion and excitement. So you kind of, that the emotions kind of then spill through into the team. And I just think that working remotely at the moment must make that quite difficult to kind of have that level of care and connection. And I know some of my clients that have big teams, it's been really hard because for some of their team, they're the only point of contact. So you're most emotionally welfaring and looking after them, as well as supporting them to do their job. So there's that, and I know some of them definitely have been on the point of burnout, not just with the firefighting and the getting stuff done to keep businesses going or change them or pivot them, but also that emotional load of I feel responsible for these people, especially if they are living on their own through lockdown, especially if they are really struggling at home or there's something more going on.
Yeah, and that really weighs, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, it's heavy. And I think a lot of the women I work with are certainly highly empathetic, if not just empaths. So there's just that absorption of feelings, and like I know for me, when I discovered that I was an empath, it's like, oh my God, like what, how confusing. What is my actual feeling and what is the world's feeling or this other person's? It's literally like a transfer, like it can be like an emotional lightning rod of someone's here and I'm like suddenly in it and feeling it with them. So yeah,
well, I was going to say, would you say that's in terms of that empath and
yeah,
if we put that back to gender,
yeah,
I mean, it is inherently a nurtured skill, I would say, but do you find that women have just a greater access, and it's just about how
I think so. If you think about, like we started talking about at the beginning, was that nurturing and what we see evidence of. I saw evidence of my mum being quite open about how she was feeling, especially after she had both of us. She went through postnatal, well, she called it the baby, back then they called it the baby blues, which is effectively postnatal depression. So she shared, I think she got the support and she shared that quite a lot. But then if I think about my dad, who was struggling with being a new dad, but also, you know, still working, he didn't share that as much. And he went through his own journey with depression later in life, and that meant that he started sharing, and he actually still, I'm really proud of him, and he's come back out of it, and he's just, you know, he's better than ever. But he keeps a journal now, but his journal isn't feeling based, which is really interesting. His journal, he likes to just write about what he's done in that day, and it's not, you know, for him that works. So it's that, you know, take the framework of journaling as something so powerful and make it work. For him, it's, he likes to then look back, what was I doing this time last year? And it's that difference, isn't it? It's almost like women, we talk about feelings. Like when you say, how are you to a woman? It would be a different conversation. How are you to a man, wouldn't it? It'd be, if you know someone better, if it's a woman, you're going to open up and say, actually, I'm not feeling great. But a guy would generally go, yeah, fine, cracking on.
So the difference is, I suppose, how that affects our leadership skills, and it's incredible about your dad, but the key point about masculine and feminine with your parents,
yeah,
is that your mum shares these things openly, and he had to learn to do that.
Yeah.
And then that's where it helps. So there is an inherent power in how women have been nurtured as women. Because we talk about these things, and of course, I'll go a bit dark for a second, which is, of course, one of the big things. Of course, male suicide is huge because of that reason, because it's not encouraged. This masculinity can get very toxic, and suppressive. So there is strengths to both, and how you develop these conversations, especially when you're leading a team. But it's also about, as you were just saying, noticing people. And you're right, in this, I mean, right now I'm looking at a camera and I'm not necessarily looking directly at you. And you miss things, miss facial expressions, hey, I've just asked you how you are, but something's telling me that that's not quite true, or you've got a mask on, or, you know, something is going on behind there. And if we're talking about the kind of brass tacks of it, is that there's the people that you're working with as a leader, but then there's, okay, how is this going to affect actually what we're delivering as well, and how we're working together, and what's going to happen in the future as well on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think as well, if you take those two different nurture paths, if you like, and you put them both into corporate world, at the moment still, based on the stats and the numbers and what I see every day, and what I'm, you know, what my mission is to change, is that generally the leadership that is recognized and role modeled the most is more the alpha style of leadership. That more masculine, that more, you know, domineering, very much like, I think, you know, I love Brené Brown's description when she kind of talks about armored versus daring, and armored is that, you know, follow me, I'm going here, whereas the daring is, where should we go, as in, you know, a completely collective decision, but we're going here together, and that, you know, I will learn and grow with you, whereas everyone was like, I'm ahead of you and you will follow me.
It's that competitive. That dog eat dogness. Oh, I love that. Armoredness is definitely
and you just almost putting the armor on. I do remember in corporate world as well that a lot of the feedback that I had as well was just, if you were a bit quieter, or if you toned yourself down, or your laugh is really loud and distracting, or you talk a lot, or if you were a bit less of you, you would do you do well, but you would do even better. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that, because I tried for years and it just never worked. And I just felt like I'd never fitted in. And now I don't need to fit in. I don't want to fit in. And I think sometimes you can lose that sense of who you are, because you see the role models around you and you're almost taking bits from here and bits from there. And it's like, that's not your natural tendency. And I love what I do, because I take your natural ability and your natural inherently what's within you, and help you shape that into the most powerful form of leadership you can have, and your fire within that.
Exactly. And then it's about executive presence and how you shape who you are and deliver it in a way that makes your work effective and makes people stand out and listen. So all of the feedback you were just talking about is personal, and about how you sound, how you look, how you think, when you speak, and all of that is present. And they're saying, oh, you need to be a certain way. And we've prescribed to that. And of course, there's company cultures and even dress codes, these kind of things.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
But there are, and in a way, I totally agree, because that creates a uniformity within the whole, which is necessary for an organization to thrive. But you have individuals in that organization, and each one of those strengths should be nurtured and celebrated in the sense. But it's about, I suppose, fine tuning to make sure that you're helping others. So if your loud laugh, is it disruptive, or is it engaging? Is it helping you get your message across? Is it helping other people engage with you and connect with you? So it's more about being purposeful, I think, with all of these things that make you you.
That's a great word. I love that. So, Alex, let's finish it off, because I'm conscious time. I think we could just talk about this all day. We'll get you on the podcast to talk about this in some more depth anyway. What's next for you? What have you got going on with you at the moment, and all the brilliant stuff you're doing within your business?
Oh, thank you. So as you mentioned at the beginning, I deal with data-led, data-driven people, individuals. And actually, one of the energy things we're talking about is this is also could be defined as extroversion and introversion. People who are very precisionists tend to fall on the either extremely kind of results-driven extrovert side, or the precisionist, systematic, the kind of quieter side, more reserved side. And it's not about seeing either as a strength or a negative or a positive, but it's about enhancing all of that and amplifying it so that it's really effective. So I've been doing a lot of work, and we just actually 2 months ago, I've forgotten what month we're in. Really exciting, because I've released a accelerator program for personal impact, specifically for those types of people who need to develop their EQ and their emotional intelligence levels to become more effective with the data they work with, to be more powerful, and to really own who they are, so they can be more confident with it and communicate it in a really powerful way. So that's now underway, and it's 12 weeks. So it really is a huge blast through into that area. So it's really exciting times.
Excellent. And obviously, people can just get in touch with you on LinkedIn, drop you a message if they want any more information.
They can go there, and they can check me out at speakingambition.com as well.
Love the name. Love it. Oh, it's so lovely to see your face.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Right, everyone, that's it for today. I'll be back on Monday, and we'll be talking about overwhelm, overthinking, overanalyzing, and just when you get stuck in your own head. So we'll be talking about that on Monday. And then my new podcast, Find Your Female Leaders on Fire, will be launching imminently. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll be popping up a waiting list to be the first to find out, and maybe even get a cheeky preview next week. So so super exciting. So thank you for today, Alex, and see you later, everyone. Bye.